here. Oh, failed to go live. Interesting. I've never had that come up. Oh, we are live. Okay, right on. Hey, Scott Carr here, host of the Solo Dad Smiling, episode 4. Very happy to have Kerri Isham with us, who I will introduce formally in about a minute and a half. I want to mention to you that my business around the Empowered Parents Network is really around helping parents reduce drama in the home, establish true work-life parenting balance, and learning to become more important to your child or children than their phone. I have a 13-year-old daughter, an 8-year-old daughter, and a 10-year-old daughter, and I can tell you I have to work on all of these. And just a little bit about myself before we introduce Kerri and talk about what you're really here for today, which is learning about the impact of pornography on preteens and teens. A fascinating topic, and Kerri's an absolute expert. Ton of value around this, and have some real actionable conversations that you can have with your children. I can tell you that a lot of what I do to support parents comes from what I've learned over the last, essentially it's been about 5 years now, raising 3 daughters on my own. And I had to find a way to really show the courage to allow my children in some ways to raise me. When I did that and I learned to get out of the way of my children, and also began to understand that the best parenting strategy we can do is to become a better person, a better listener, to show more patience. Sounds easy, but we have this brain, this funny thing called the brain, don't we, Kerri, that's running and passing things along to our children that maybe we might have learned from our own parents. And I sort of began to conquer that, and I saw the changes in my own kids. And so that's really what I do. And I can tell you more about that at the end. But what I will say is I'm delighted to have you here, as is Kerri. I see some viewers showing up, which is fantastic. And I want to tell you briefly about Kerri so that you really know her background and why she's so passionate about sexual health, the facts, the empowerment piece, and making this really digestible, not just for students K-12 here in British Columbia and other parts of Canada and North America, I understand, but also just for parents as well, and for teachers. So Kerri Isham is a knowledgeable, experienced and passionate sexual health educator, coach and facilitator. She's dedicated to excellence and committed to the empowerment of people of all ages. Her primary goal is to make exploring sexual health fun and meaningful, and to alleviate the shame and embarrassment sometimes associated with this topic. Currently, she runs her own company called Power Up Workshops, which specializes in sexual health education for preschool to grade 12, and her 3 main areas of focus are sexual abuse prevention, puberty education, and gender sexual orientation advocacy. Among many other things, and a couple of books that she's written, and the brand that she's built to great success and great empowerment for many that she comes across. Kerri also completed the Sexual Health Educator Certification Program in June 2011 with options for sexual health in Vancouver. Kerri, welcome to Solo Dad Smiling. Great to have you with us today.
Hi, Scott. Nice to be here.
Right, okay, wonderful. I think you're joining us from sunny Nanaimo, which is great, and I'm here in downtown Burnaby, opposite Metrotown, and I know your connection is deep with this topic for many different reasons, but you're also a mom. Before I get into the questions, can you tell us a little bit about your own parenting journey that you've been on?
Yeah, sure. I have been a single mom since my daughter was 11 months old. Her dad supports us, emotionally, spiritually, and financially as well, and parents from another home. She's lived with me predominantly since that time, and she's 16 right now. So we have run the gamut of the puberty years and the acne and the addiction to the phone and the relationships and the boyfriends and all of that kind of stuff. So I feel that this is a really good time for me to share some of the information, because I'm coming against some new things, but I've also passed through some things that I think I can help parents if they're sort of in the 12, 13, 14-year-old age group.
Absolutely, and there's so much impacting, our children today. Not even just the comments of certain presidential candidates that we've come across, I suppose, in the week or two, or some of those realities. It's amazing, really, as adults, if we think about our legacy of showing up the best that we can possibly be in all phases of our life. I mean, it's so vital, isn't it, the messages? But let's, I know that the people that are on this call are really keen to know, how you define pornography. What is it? It's coming in so many shapes and forms now. you know, and for you, what is pornography, Carrie?
I think pornography is basically any sexually explicit material that's intended to be or is used as a sexual outlet. And the focus is to create a connection between the user and the material instead of a real human being. And the types of pornography that I feel kids are using is categorized as gonzo porn, which is the pornography that's degrading, dehumanizing, and objectifying, specifically women, but men are also objectified as well.
Wow. Okay. And then and that's, you know, wonderfully said. And I guess obviously with kids with the devices and iPads and whatnot, and there's so much access today, even with, and we'll get into this, even with the limits that we place in our own homes, there's just so many more ways to access it. And we'll get into that, of course. But here's another question I know parents will want to know is, you know, why do preteens and teens want pornography in the first place?
Well, I'll give you sort of an exhaustive list of what I've had from my students, because I've asked my students this, and I ask them anywhere, it depends on when they start asking, grade 4, grade 5, when they ask about what is pornography, all the way up to my grade 12s. I think the thing is, pornography is anonymous. You can go on there essentially, unless your parents have, you know, blockers, or they check your history and you don't know how to delete it, because the kids are always a step ahead of us. We really can look at it without having anybody know. It's very accessible to kids. They can type in any word. There's all sorts of different ways that pornographers, you know, lure kids into becoming sort of lifetime viewers. I can talk about that later. For most students, they're not paying for their own internet. So pornography viewing is super affordable to them. I think, you know, if I look at the reasons why kids are going, the number one reason I think is curiosity. So I strongly believe that if kids have parents who are approachable from a very young age, from, you know, preschool, toddler years, who are able to answer any sexual health questions in a timely manner, because we don't always have the answers. If they get sexual health education in primary school, intermediate school, and high school, I really do believe that if their curiosity is saturated, they wouldn't have to have such a pull to go to pornography. Mm. They're also going for arousal. So most of my students will acknowledge that this is a form of, you know, a masturbation tool is what they usually say. And, you know, some of the kids are saying, I go to pornography for my sex education. I need to know how people are sharing their bodies. They also say that they want to have open attitudes about sexuality. And I definitely think that the LGBTQ youth and children are going to pornography because they're not as, they don't have the same easy access to, you know, same gender, you know, sexual interaction that they would heterosexual interactions in media, on music videos and things like that. And sometimes they're going to pornography because they feel pressure from their boyfriend or girlfriend. They want to know what they're supposed to do. And there's definitely expectations on how men or boys and women and girls are supposed to be in pornography. And then I had a client a couple weeks ago who probably taught me more than I taught him. And he said, I go to pornography because I hear about these weird things that people are talking about, and I want to go to find out what it is. I need to be in the loop. So some of the things that the young people are viewing is very horrific.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, the fact that they're going there for sexual education is you know, really, really something else. And that will tie into this next question, of course. And wonderful answers. I know I see some more people showing up on the call here today and getting some great information. Again, we've got Kerri Isham, who is an expert in sexual health and an educator in the province of British Columbia. And Kerri, you know, how is it that pornography differs from real life? You know, and how do we convey the fact that it's different to our children? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is the big question. I think a lot of parents unknowingly give their children devices, whether it's an iPad or a desktop or iPhone, or let them even browse on their own personal laptops, which is very dangerous, especially if you have pornography for yourself. I've had students that have accessed pornography on a parent's iPad and then shared it, you know, took their DS took a video of the video and then took it to school and showed grade 3 kids on the school bus. So essentially, what I've offered parents, so anything that I talk about, I have a downloadable PDF on my website, which we can share at the end. And it's basically, I just made columns, like pornography is this and real life is this. I think the biggest thing that parents need to convey before they ever give their child a device is that the things that they see online are not real life. Mm-hmm. So the sex that they will see in pornography, because it's not a matter of if a child sees it, it's when. All children at some point in time will see pornography. It doesn't matter how well screened we are at home. They'll go to sleepovers. They'll see stuff at school. You know, kids are very curious about this. So we want to focus on the unrealistic expectations that people feel when they look at pornography about their own body, about their sexual practices. So things like pornography is public. And when you share your body with someone in real time, this is supposed to be a private exchange.
Right, very different, you know. And so it sounds like it's tying almost into the way our children and teens and preteens are socializing anyway, isn't it? I mean, there's a word, you know. Can you talk a little bit about that there maybe their predisposition to be more public with what they're saying and doing anyhow?
Yeah, I think the boundaries are definitely a lot looser with kids today about their bodies. And we see that in the prevalence of sexting, for example. You know, the last study that I read said that 50% of teenagers are sexting, whether that's taking video or whether that's taking pictures or whether it's sending sexual chat to each other. And one of the things that I wanted to discuss before I get into some differences in pornography and real life is, you know, when something is normalized in society, and I read about this a couple weeks ago, there's a problematic behavior that becomes an accepted part of our society. And the more normalized this behavior is, the more it's viewed as beneficial or preferential. Like, this is something that I want to be doing. And as we're entrenched in this normalization, it's when people like me say, hey, I think pornography could be really detrimental to our young people, it looks like I might be the problem. So I'm not buying into the normalization of, well, all kids are doing this, they're just experimenting. Because to be quite honest, when the child is under 18 and they're taking pictures of themselves, this is illegal. And it's increasing the availability of child pornography for sexual predators, where they used to have to seek hard for it, have underground, you know, black market kind of thing. Now they're able to go on someone's Instagram account or request to be added to Facebook. And because a lot of youth don't screen who comes because they're looking just for the ads and the likes and the follows, that they accept anybody.
Wow, that's scary. That's scary. Kim here, who's listening in today, Carrie, just before we go to a few more of your questions around statistics and whatnot, she says that she's heard it, porn being described as, you know, a sports highlight reel instead of the whole game. I think you were sort of talking about that as well. How do you, as an educator, if you're in the classroom, reconcile that with either parents or children?
Well, and I think Kim is being right on the money there. I think, you know, I went to training with Gail Dines. She wrote the book Pornland, How Pornography is Hijacking Our Sexuality, and she's a prof at Boston University. One of the things that she was talking about is sometimes they're spending 4 or 5 days on a video, taking the highlights of the video and then putting them together. But what our young people see is they just see that 30-second video, the 2.5-minute video. They see unrealistic things like, you know, penises that are off the scale large, which I think is the intention to make men feel inferior, or a person with a penis feel inferior. You know, we don't see any pubic hair at all. We don't see general hair on the body for both men and women. And this is really confusing to our young people. We know that pubic hair actually has a function, 3 functions that I know of. So one is to provide cushioning between the bodies during intimacy. And 2 is to trap bacteria in the pubic hair. So it actually can reduce your chances of getting sexually transmitted infections. And the 3rd reason that we have pubic hair is because it releases a pheromone which possibly could help you attract a future mate. So we're seeing, an increase of people going to emergency with multiple ingrown hairs, and they've cut themselves during, trimming or shaving or things like that. And young people really feel the pressure starting in about grade 4 of like, what am I supposed to do with this hair? Then there's the vulvas that all look exactly the same. And in real life, vulvas come in different shapes and sizes and colors. And sometimes the outer labia is larger than the inner labia. And we get all sorts of different looking vulvas. In pornography, many of the women have been willing to have surgery to remove the inner labia. It's one of the fastest growing surgeries for women. It's called labioplasty. And women are willing, for the sake of someone else, to remove very sensitive tissue. So all of the physical traits, the men being, quite muscular, the women being tiny with larger breasts, it's super confusing to the average kid because they're comparing themselves, and then self-esteem and body image suffers. And there's studies to show also too that boys who watch pornography have higher expectations of what their girlfriend's body is going to look like, rather than accepting that bodies come in different shapes and sizes and colors.
Well, and I guess that's what Kim would refer to as the real game of acceptance and love and intimacy that we want to have. And so do you just talk a little bit then, Kerri, are you actually seeing this in clients or in the classroom where sexual behaviors when they are intimate in real time are changing based on their pornographic or the consumption of pornography?
Well, last year, interesting that you bring that up. In the first few years of teaching, I didn't really deal with sexting. I didn't deal with pornography until about 4 years ago. There seems to have been an explosion with child and youth viewing. I did get a note from one of my teen girls in one of my grade 11 classes, and she said to me, my boyfriend watches pornography, which makes me feel very uncomfortable because I don't want to be like the girls in the video. I don't want to express myself that way. I don't want to have sex with him. I want to make love with him. And now I feel like there's a constant comparison between me and the women that he's viewing. And I think, pornography does shift people's preferences for what they think is, quote unquote normal. It's definitely shifting the sexual lives of people and what they're expecting from their partner, which then makes people potentially super uncomfortable, but they're willing to play along because they want to be with that person. I think it's super confusing for youth to understand, that because they don't have a point of reference, and even maybe more so for children, if they've never been intimate with someone before and they started watching pornography at 10, and their first sexual experience isn't until they're 16. They have 6 years of viewing, degrading, dehumanizing pornography, and they may shift their attitude to thinking that that is what's normal because they don't have a reference point. They have nothing to compare it to.
Wow, absolutely. No kidding. I mean, 10 years old, right. Okay. Great. Another question from Kim, and anyone that's listening right now, if you'd like to just type in the messages or your questions to the chat box as Kim has. It'd be great to get your questions. I know this is a topic of deep fascination. We have a real expert here in Kerri Isham helping us through and understanding the impact of pornography on preteens and teens. And you can probably see the question there that came up, Kerri. I know you have a lot to say for Kim, but is there anything that we can suggest to our kids to say to another child that wants to show them pornography? What's the stopgap for our own children? How can we help them through that?
Well, I think kids are being faced with that definitely at sleepovers or birthday parties, and sometimes even at school on the playground. I think a child would have no idea what to say unless the teachers and parents have prepped them with something in their toolbox. So what I teach kids, if they're shown pornography or they see pornography, is to let an adult know right away. And there will be pressure for them not to report because kids often say that's, snitching or whatever. But, reporting is to get someone out of trouble, not to get someone in trouble. They're doing something that's illegal. I mean, showing underage bodies particularly is illegal if the person was under 18. But we don't want kids to be shoving images in kids' faces because that's not consent. Yeah. And teaching kids about consent is so critical. That consent is you are enthusiastically agreeing to do something ongoing, and that that the person is enjoying the type of touch you're giving them or the thing that you're showing them, that they're on board.
Right. And then even if the child's uncomfortable, it's on the bus or they're walking home and Kim's, asking us again, there's nothing they can do besides, do you think just telling adults the best thing they can do? Because that's a hard thing for a child to do, isn't there? Sometimes we just ignore it or they look and look away. That's usually probably more typical, isn't it? And so nothing, I guess there's too much peer pressure, isn't there, in that moment for the kid to really reconcile what to do. Would you agree?
I think so, yeah. And, going back to the normalization bit, if our kids have seen pornography for years and they see sexualized images on billboards and magazines and TV shows and computer games, their tolerance for what we think is inappropriate or too sexualized, we're not even in the same ballpark. These kids have been oversaturated with sexual images. They think it's not a big deal. So the conversation with the parent could be something like, if somebody shows you pornography at school, and obviously they'd have to define what pornography is, sexual images of people on a screen, I want you to tell me right away. And I want you to tell me what I saw, because we do know that some kids, when they see these images, what they're reporting back to researchers are that they're not able to forget the image. And we know in brain research that the brain actually is storing these images for later retrieval. This is not something that we want kids to be pulling out of their, brain while they're sharing their body with someone, something that, could potentially hurt their partner emotionally or physically or both.
Excellent. And alongside that, Kim and others on the call, I got great advice when Carrie and I were touching base in the summer. I wanted to get ahead of it a little bit with my 13-year-old, and Carrie simply suggested a dialogue around this. And you can clarify, of course, Carrie, but something along the lines of, I know that children your age have probably seen porn, and that's maybe something that you have or haven't seen, but maybe kids your age have seen. And, if you have, I'd like you to tell me about it. And at the very least, I want you to know that that's not normal sexual behavior. That's not how it is. I think it was something along the lines of that. So Kim and others, that's the kind of dialogue that you could have, sort of removing it from the blame piece of talking one-on-one. But, kids your age, I realize now, have come across pornography. And, right, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Last year I did a workshop with grade 3s and 4s. It was sort of one that I wanted to test out about what information should be public and which information should be private when you're online. And I just simply asked the kids about the number of devices they had at home, what they had access to. And I asked them, has anyone ever seen a picture of somebody who was naked on the screen? Every single child put up their hand. Now, this was a middle class school where, they may even have more access because, it seems maybe the more money you have, the more availability of resources to be able to purchase an iPad, iPod, whatever, DS. You've got all of the video games and things like that. So, yeah, absolutely, I would agree.
Okay, super. On that note then, just again, we've got about 7 or 8 minutes left with Carrie here, so everybody stick around. I encourage you to stick around because Carrie's got some great more advice for us around some statistics and some long-term impact that she's going to help us with. But what are some statistics, Carrie, regarding pornography in children in terms of viewership and experiences?
Okay. So just generally, we know that teenagers spend about 8.08 hours a day using various forms of media. And this is not including schoolwork or talking or texting on a cell phone. And we know that 7th to 12th graders spend an average of 1.5 hours per day sending or receiving texts. So my thinking would be the more time somebody is on a device, and the kids will agree with this, the more likely you are to participate in activities that may not be beneficial for you. So kids who have access to a laptop in their bedroom, the parents are sleeping, the chances of them looking up inappropriate sexual images would be super high. So other statistics that we know like 75% of websites have a visual teaser to try to rope kids in. So it could be like a dancing monkey in the top corner. We also know that pornographers will buy up misspelled words and then buy up the URL. So they know that if a child misspells a word, they're likely to go to pornographic websites. We know that 3% of pornography websites require proof of age. And that we know that nearly 50% of kids who see pornography by accident say they can't really forget this first image. So in terms of, what percentage of kids are looking at pornography, they say about 7 out of 10 people going online are male, and 3 on 10 are female. And the largest percentage of internet porn viewing is children ages 12 to 17, which would be smack dab in the middle of puberty, where they're super impressionable about sexual practices and things like that. And then, years ago, it used to be the average age for first-time pornography viewing is 11. My last stat that I read was 9. So, most of this could be sort of an accidental oopsie-doopsie. I stumbled upon this, but that's what the pornographers want. They want our kids to access pornography, to be lifetime consumers where people are willing to pay for it. Because the kids will go to the free sites, YouPorn, RedTube, Pornhub. Those are some of the more popular ones that the kids go to because they change the videos regularly. But I've also met with parents whose child racked up their credit card hundreds of dollars because they wanted to go into the secret this or the whatever, and they wanted more.
Right on. I want to throw one more question at you. Great stats, alarming statistics. I guess as a father with 3 daughters, thinking that 3 in 10 girls have access to it, either way, you're also suggesting that the nature of intimacy can change for teenagers, and people in their 20s and whatnot. So that's a concern. So males are being influenced to have intimacy a certain way, and so that impacts our daughters, doesn't it? So either way, we have impact. It's troubling, really is. Now, I did want to mention, I guess I'll come back to that question because I got to grab that again. But what are some of these longer term impacts then of children? So you're saying that free access, impressions don't leave them. Then there's use for curiosity, use for arousal. What does that do to them over time, Kerri?
Well, I think, one of the long-term effects is that they have sort of exaggerated beliefs about what sex is. And that may lead to sort of more permissible attitudes about who am I going to share my body with. We know that people can experience negative attitudes towards sexual partners if they don't act in a way that they feel is appropriate or in a way that they would like. Definitely unrealistic sexual values and beliefs we're seeing in males, and then sort of a sexual preoccupation. And then females, we're seeing sort of a physical inferiority because they cannot compare themselves to the people on the screen. And then with the objectification process, we're looking at, eating disorders, low self-esteem, depression, depressed moods, and things like that. I know that there is some debate, is pornography an addiction or is it not? How I sort of deal with that when I'm talking to kids is that when you're viewing pornography, you do get a release of dopamine in the brain, and dopamine is a hormone that makes you feel good. So you go back for more and you go for something a little bit more novel. But what happens is teenagers are very prone to desensitization. So they get very used to the images that they see, and then they're not able to get sexually aroused. And then what we would see them doing is going to find possibly more deviant, more unusual images, and then they're masturbating to those images. So some late teen, early 20 males are finding that they're teaching their brain to prefer what's on the screen to a real life partner, and therefore some young people are experiencing erectile dysfunction. So the inability to get an erection or to sustain an erection because you're preferring what you're seeing on the screen. And the person that you're with is not willing to do some of the things on the screens because it's unrealistic for them to want to do that. Then it's sex is boring or, uninviting or unstimulating.
Well, that's amazing. It's hard to imagine that it comes to that, that there's that deep a reaction. But you're talking about habits and you're talking about, connecting into them. Before I ask you one more question, Kim comes back again and asks, given, I think what she's saying here is, with the stats that you've thrown out there and knowing that average age of 9 for first time image, so many users, the bulk of them between 12 and 17, is there any way that showing them appropriate images of males or of females or males or, would be beneficial? What would you suggest as an alternative?
Well, I think this is sexual health comes into huge play here, especially sexual health that's inclusive for the LGBTQ community. I personally would love to see mandatory classes in high school that look at sex specifically as pleasurable for most people. 2 to 3% of the population are asexual, and they may not be interested in gaining that information. But I think it's good to have because your friends may be sexual. I would love youth to understand that, you know, the entire body is an erogenous zone, not just the mouth, you know, the anus, the vagina, the penis. I would love young people to understand that, you know, women and men's sexual arousal patterns are very different. And then it could take, you know, an average woman 15 to 20 minutes to even be in a zone where she can move from sort of her thinking brain to her, you know, to the vulva area. And I think it's really important to understand, like in pornography, there is no foreplay. There is no caressing or intimacy or talking to one another or, you know, sharing who you are as a person. So yes, there is definitely a place for educational videos. I mean, I don't know how many adult men and adult women go through life going, I have no idea how my partner's body works. I don't know how my body works. I don't know how to ask for what I want and what I need. I feel so much shame about this that I don't really want to ask my partner because I feel I might get rejected. And then I don't know if that plays into, you know, the amount of sexual promiscuity or the number of affairs that we're seeing or the divorce rate. You know, if people can ask what they want, but they, as adults, you can be, you know, a sexual health seeker and take classes and things like that. But if kids had that information young, I think it would save a lot of people traumatic situations. People would know, you know, this is a gray area. I need to be really clear with this. You know, I think it's really important that we give kids access to books and access to healthy videos and even classes for boys on, you know, on if they're heterosexual, how does a woman's body work, and for girls, and teach them the skills like we do in all other areas of their life so that they don't feel incompetent.
Very cool. Very cool. It all makes perfect sense. And again, just a little help. I think, you know, backtracking a little bit, I know a couple people came on past 12 o'clock, and I think you mentioned at the outset, Carrie, that some of this dialogue and modeling and openness that we can have with our children as a measure to educate and to understand and deal with pornography is you mentioned, you know, being able to be real with your children, I think, and having an open connection with them. Can you describe how a parent, you know, might be able to do that with, you know, in other ways of their life and in other parts of their relationship that, you know, we tend not to want to talk about and maybe put our heads in the sand a little bit?
Yeah, the head in the sand thing is definitely very common. I mean, I think it's really important if we don't want to pass our shame and discomfort and embarrassment onto our children about sexuality, then we have to really do our own work. And some of us had a lot more work to do than others because of, you know, child sexual abuse or sexual assault or, you know, just inappropriate talk or touch that happened throughout the life. I think it's really important to seek out educational opportunities. There's a ton of online resources available. There's a ton of books on parenting healthy, you know, sexual children, because they are sexual, and sometimes we don't even want to acknowledge that. They're sexual from the time that they're born. We have certain parts that are sensitive to touch and stimulation. And so I think talking to other friends, I think, you know, joining a parents network, things like that, talking to other parents, being willing to talk to your partner, and being willing to say to your child, I have no idea the answer to that question, but I'm going to seek it out. I'm going to go to some reputable websites modeling that you're going to places that you know are going to be appropriate. And then asking your child, okay, I'm taking 24 hours. We're going to meet after school tomorrow. I'm going to share everything I know about this, but I don't have all of the answers right now, so I need to look into it. Just like their child might need to look into some questions that they may have as well. None of us are perfect. I have had stumbling conversations with my daughter. I do this work every single day, and some conversations, even for me, are really tough to have, including the talk around pornography.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, no doubt. It is a challenge, you know. And I want, Carrie, you know, you have some final thoughts. That's fine. You can think about what you might what you share day to day and what you share in your workshops and in your classrooms. Maybe there's one way to conclude the conversation, but I did want folks to know that if you want to reach Kerri directly and learn more about her, the free resources on her website, which are tremendous. They've really helped me as a father. It's just bang on information. I don't know anyone else like her that has such practical, straightforward, yet empowering type of resources. You can go to Power Up Workshops. And is that .com, Kerri?
.ca or .com, either one.
That's great. And Kerri Isham, that's how you spell her name. You can connect with her. I'm going to type in your email here, Kerri, as well. It's Kerri at powerupworkshops.com. Is that correct? Yeah. And tell us about one or two of your books that you've written, and just one way to give parents some hope, maybe, that we can find a way through it to create, help create our children as, normally functioning sexual beings, among other things.
Okay. The first book that I wrote, I released 2 years ago. It's called Puberty, Coming to a Body Near You. And what I wanted to do was provide a resource for young people, grade 3 to 7, that could be a side-by-side book for a parent or a grandparent or a foster parent or a social worker to work through with a child to normalize this changing process. Because I think puberty is such an amazing time for connection as the body changes, sharing things that happen to you. Basically, it goes through all the physical, social, emotional changes, but it's an interactive workbook. So they have to draw your parents' face when they talk to you about puberty, draw your face, draw yourself on a roller coaster ride, and write down all the feelings that you've had in the last week. So they really need to engage with the book. The second book that I released last spring is called Body Smart Right from the Start. And it's a book for ages 3 to 10, depending on how much sexual health they've had in the past. And this book is activities, again, interactive, that are meant to be a side-by-side book. So an adult, working through the booklet with the child. And the focus is on how can I give my child the most tools to make them the most abuse resistant. And that my book is, there is no promise to have your child avoid sexual abuse, but my focus is on giving kids tools so that they will report the first time, and that they will have the information they need to be able to seek out a trusted adult so the abuse doesn't continue.
Oh, fantastic. This has been wonderful. I know we've had some excellent viewership and some great questions here today, Kerri. Wonderful to spend this time with you. I'm just thinking out loud here. I wonder, have you ever done an interactive master class like this, or an interview like this, where you've had maybe parents and children on? Do you think that would ever be a format that we could look at with the Empowered Parents Network in the future?
Yeah, I think that would be great. I know that I made my 6 must-have conversations video on Vimeo available to parents, because I know that not everybody lives in Nanaimo and surrounding area. And until my daughter graduates, I don't do a ton of traveling yet, but will once she's done school in a year and a half. Yeah, I mean, I do live presentations for parents with their young people, their little people, all the way up to puberty age and including teenagers. And the feedback's been very positive. Maybe I could come to Burnaby. We could do a joint workshop together.
Love to. That would be great, Kerri. And maybe even with just having parents come online with their kids is another option. We'll look at it. Kerri, it's been wonderful to be with you today. Just really empowering stuff on an absolutely crucial topic for parents and for youth. All the information is there for Kerri. Again, her most recent book is Body Smart Right from the Start. You could contact Kerri directly at that email right there, Kerri at powerupworkshops.com. Ask how she can get more information, how you can get more information on her video, on her books, or just a conversation. And we welcome interacting with you again. Love to. Always a pleasure, Kerri. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Good. Let's go to see. I'm going to give you a quick ring here, Kerri, for 2 minutes. Hold on, please.
Okay.
Right there. 1 sec.